Emily Davis, and today we're going to explore the question of how is it possible that our nation's schools remain segregated today in each of these learning objectives that examine the current school system, determine causes of segregation, and understand its risk in our future. In the immediate years after the Brown ruling, lawmakers continued to produce momentum towards increased desegregation for Black students, introducing the 1964 Civil Rights Act. By the 1990s, hundreds of desegregation orders across the nation had fallen through, and racial segregation by income and wealth began to grow, placing the promise of Brown at risk, with many American schools still segregated. This is because the 1964 Act targeted a type of segregation most commonly found in the southern states, and, for example, meant that southern states could not allow schools to officially designate themselves as for whites only. This only fixed the issue in the South, but the Act also failed to address the so-called racial imbalance commonly found in northern schools, and since then, federal efforts to integrate schools face many difficult challenges and limited progress. To further understand, we'll examine how the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District's efforts to address school segregation by introducing a desegregation busing plan, a program that slowly chipped away at segregation but is no longer under federal court orders to desegregate, and since then has opened a school choice system allowing parents to apply to any school, and as a consequence, levels of desegregation steadily decreased as schools were only as integrated as its neighborhoods. I led with that example because today a majority of kids attend schools in the neighborhood in which they live, and given our nation's long history of housing discrimination, neighborhoods in New York and many other states remain severely segregated today. This is because race has played a long role in local real estate practices. In the PBS The House We Live In documentary, the concept of race became institutionalized by the Federal Housing Administration, where race was as much a factor in real estate assessment as the condition of the property. By this time, the racially driven logic was widely adopted by private industries and federal investigators, and this led to evaluating communities based on social and economic worth. As a result, all white suburban communities received the highest score and colored them green to signify an economically prosperous community. In contrast, communities that were all minority or in the process of changing would receive the lowest rating and be colored red, a method known as redlining. Today, decades of redlining and residential segregation continue to have an effect upon the segregation of schools, so as students are assigned to schools based on socioeconomic status and achievement, the connection between racial segregation has intensified education gaps between rich and poor students, and between white and students of color. Comparing the achievement outcomes of students, Rosalind Arlen Mickelson suggests tracking as a persistent barrier to equal education opportunity because of its effect on racial equity and student academic outcomes. Mickelson questions the efficacy of the CMS district desegregation model due to their use of curriculum tracking, which has been designed to enhance teaching through targeting instruction and course content to the student's ability. Curriculum tracking is a commonly utilized tool meant to enhance student learning. In doing so, students are placed in high, such as advanced courses, to low, like special educational courses or ESL tracks, that are appropriate to their needs. Although in theory this sounds great, Mickelson argues tracking as a form of segregation such that the lowest tracks are disproportionately Black and the highest track placements are disproportionately white. This demonstrates a strong correlation with students' race and social class, and as a result, this leaves many Black and low track students much more likely to attend schools with inexperienced instructors and less likely to offer college prep curriculum. This also limits their access to high-quality education. Thus, the direct effects of tracking placement hold a powerful influence on high school grade point averages, student test scores, and student attitudes towards education moving forward. Additionally, the practice of tracking has the ability to undermine the benefits of some integrated policies such as busing, which was brought by the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. As mentioned before, parental choice and school choice programs are another way in which schools remain segregated today. Iris Rothberg argues the rise in charter schools has only widened the gap in student achievement, and because charter schools design classrooms that meet the needs of their students Roebuck argues certain design features magnify the risk of segregation. For example, some charter schools have target-specific racial groups and therefore lead to directly increased segregation. Because they're also run by educational management organizations, high socioeconomic families have far greater leverage in gaining access to the most competitive schools, both in finding the information needed to choose among schools and also having the resources to enable their children to attend these schools. Some charter schools exclude students from consideration because of parental involvement and their demands, and others choose where to locate influences enrollment options given the transportation difficulties for low-income students. So how is it possible that our nation's schools remain segregated today? Well, as we learned, school segregation is a complex problem rooted in our nation's history, from residential discrimination, tracking, to school assignment policies and a rise in charter schools. As a result, failure to implement desegregation and provide equitable education for all children is reflective of our nation's inability to seriously address the roots of the race gap in academic achievement, and this has sustained the racial imbalances and current school segregation on the basis of race and income.